this is a topic that I have covered in the past. It's been a couple years, so some of you may have either forgotten or you didn't attend that one. So I'm going to cover it again because I think it's so important. 12 things to brainstorm before writing a page. And the reason I think it's important is because too often we as writers, myself included, we go from concept to page work so quickly. And we think that our brainstorming is also including character work and structure, etc., but it's still really just kind of sitting in conceptual mode. And yet we're probably not even brainstorming the concept enough. And so we just kind of try to trust our own inherent storyteller. We jump right to pages. And, that's the fun part. The fun part is actually writing interior coffee shop, day, and then you get into the scene direction and then the dialogue. And that's what makes us feel like screenwriters. But in order for us to actually enjoy the process of finishing and then doing something with the script and submitting it and querying and, submitting to contests and everything, we have to do a lot of pre-work, pre-development work, if you will, pre-writing work before we get to pages. So that's my big, soapbox preaching moment. And I'll get into all that just to say hello to everybody else. Vladimir from Serbia, I love it. Good evening from the holy city of Jerusalem, where it's 5 after 9 o'clock. Good to be here. Wow. I love seeing people from all over the world. It's so cool that here I am in my little office in tiny town, Wisconsin, and I'm able to communicate with people in Serbia and Jerusalem and Toronto and all these other places. It's so cool. Not to say that, all of the American cities are any less than. Darshana in Santa Monica. Darshana is still in Santa Monica. I have a call with you tomorrow. But anyway, just to give a little background on me, in case you don't know, I am a consultant. I was the director of education for the ISA and still host classes. And I'm hosting a 30-day challenge coming up in October. I'll get into that in a second. I've been doing this in terms of working with writers one-on-one, teaching in classroom spaces, but also in this style as far as the Zoom classroom, and personally developing projects and writers for about almost 20 years now. Started at Writers Boot Camp, if anybody knows or remembers Writers Boot Camp, and I was there for about 6 years, pretty much running the operation. And then I found my way to the ISA and helped develop a whole bunch of things like our development slate and helped launch the Fast Track Fellowship. And I've created a bunch of coursework. And of course, now I do these on a fairly regular basis. It's been a little bit since we've done one. The summer tends to be, a little bit of a lull, because we are all hopefully doing something fun outdoors or going on vacation or just taking a little time off. But now that we're getting into September, it's kind of this idea of back to school time. So it's good timing for me to jump on and talk about this particular topic. A couple little reminders here. The 30-day challenge, the 30-day screenwriting challenge, I believe this is the 5th year I'm doing it. I'd have to look that up. Over the past few years, I've done 2 in 1 year. So it's starting on October 1st. I'm going to be on Zoom, much like what you're looking at right now, every single day, 4 office hours, walking everybody through the coursework that you're going to be taking, as well as giving, answers to questions and helping out with very light feedback. I'm not going to be able to review everybody's material because hopefully we have hundreds of people in the challenge, but I'm going to be there for 30 straight days. And the whole point of this challenge is, yes, to finish a script in 30 days, but it's more about showing you that you can. Even if you aren't actually able to finish the script or complete the script in 30 days, you're going to learn that you're able and that you can. It really just depends on time, but also knowing what you're going to work on every time you sit down during a writing session. And I think a lot of us can agree that's part of the difficulty. That's also one of the reasons why I'm hosting this webinar today. Here are 12 things that we can do before we're writing pages. And the 30-day challenge is going to go into much more detail there. And Scott, if you can put into the comment section, because I did not log in properly to be able to type into the comment section. Sorry, I've been talking already this morning and my voice is going, but type in SF30 day 1. SF30 day 1. All of you who are watching this, whether it's the recording or right now live, you can get $50 off the 30-day challenge if you want to join. If you can't join every single day for office hours, it's totally fine. I'm going to have a couple different time frames, one in the morning and then one in the evening. And it'll alternate in terms of the days and when that is. But just because some of you, you're overseas in Jerusalem or Serbia or something, you're not going to be able to make like a 5:30 Chicago time office hours. So I have some in the morning as well. So it's going to be fun. The community that's made. Thank you, Amy. And look at this, Jordan's putting it in too. You're all helping. I appreciate that. So when you go, and then you can follow this link. And Scott, if you don't mind posting that 30-day link into the chat so people can just copy and paste it. You can join me and all of your fellow writers. And we're going to have this type of kind of atmosphere every single day. You don't have to join every day if you can't. But the goal is to try to finish a script in 30 days, if not a solid outline. And really, the main reason I love the 30-day challenge that I created is that it sets a habit for you. You get used to trying to write something every single day. And that's really what we need to be focused on, everybody. We can't really afford to be, 15 minutes a week kind of thing. We're just not going to get anything done. And there are people out there that are, they have more time and availability. That is understandable. But we're just going to have to try. That's the whole point of what we're doing here, is to dedicate ourselves to what we actually enjoy doing. And hopefully the 30-day challenge is going to make that fun and give you some exercises and tools and instructions on how to just stay productive. Beyond that, I am launching a professional lab. It's a 3-month lab. It's going to be in association with the ISA, but I'm going to be hosting it every week. We're going to have a workshop, and I'm going to be developing material for and with you, along with everybody who's in the lab itself. I'm having 20 maximum writers, 20 maximum people in the lab itself. So if you want, when you're interested, I don't have any kind of like payment portal or anything yet, and I haven't started marketing this yet. But if you're curious, email me, max@thestoryfarm.org, and I'll put you on a waiting list. And I already have about 8 or 9 people who want to do this. And so it's going to fill up kind of quickly. It's not going to be crazy expensive. I've been working with the payments, amount for a little bit, and I want to make this inexpensive. Email me. I'll give you more information if you're able and wanting to do this, because it's going to start in January. So we've got plenty of time. We can go on a payment plan if you want. But the point of this is to get you prepared to hopefully be considered by the ISA's development slate. You're going to have multiple reads by multiple readers, including myself, after the lab is done. So it's going to be pretty intense. So I'm looking for writers who are very serious, who are looking to really move forward in terms of their craft and their writing, and have a really solid project finished within those 3 months. So email me, max@thestoryfarm.org. I don't mean to go too long here in terms of the announcements. Scott, if you can put my Substack link into the comment section, you all can subscribe for free to my Substack if you want to read 3 emails a week. I have an audio podcast in there too. Okay, here we go. 12 things to brainstorm before writing a page. I'm going to share my screen in a second, but kind of like what I said before, and Vladimir signed up for the 30-day challenge. That's great. So did Marcus. I love it. So again, kind of to reiterate, the reason I want to cover this is because, for one, like I said, we need to be thinking about the pre-writing work a lot more than we think we already are. I'm sure plenty of you watching this are thinking, oh, I outline and I do all this, but I'm going to break this down into very specific elements that we need to be focused on to get as much out of each of these elements, so that once you do get into the structural work where you're actually outlining, where you're trying to beat the story out and you're trying to, figure out what happens at the end of my first act, what happens at the midpoint, what happens at the low point, we have a much stronger idea as to why we're placing these moments and scenes in those places. Otherwise, we're just kind of flying by the seat of our pants, and it's, we're all inherent storytellers, and we're all good at this already, right? We know what we're doing, but we don't know the tools and exercises as much as we should. So I'm not necessarily teaching to the top of the curve here by any means, because we're all at different levels of ability and experience. But I think you're all going to be able to get something out of this. So let me share my screen and get this going. All right, there it is. 12 things to brainstorm before writing a page. Let's get into it. So first and foremost, character uniqueness. Character is everything. Your characters drive the plot, and the plot responds to the character's choices. We want to be thinking along those lines. Yes, when we develop or at least come up with a new idea, it's usually plot first. It's usually some kind of situation. But we want to be thinking the type of character that we can place within that situation. Because if you have a situation, it could be anything. Let's just, off the top of my head, thinking of Jim Carrey in Liar Liar. If we, mainly because most of you either know about the movie or you've seen it, the situation is that he is unable to tell a lie for 24 hours while he's trying to make partner by winning a major case at his law firm. That's the situation. If you put any character, technically speaking, you could put any character in that situation, but what they created was this kind of self-involved, workaholic, absent father, total liar, and only interested in his own self-promotion, and there's a type of character they're placing within that situation. But if you change that up and make it this really kind of non-confrontational, scared of taking risks, risk-averse sort of lawyer that he may not be very good at his job, and we give the same situation, it's a completely different movie. So we need to be looking at this idea of who is the character that I can place that is perfect for this situation. And I was watching a writer on Instagram. He and I can't remember her name. Her last name is Tepper, Tepper. But they have a podcast called The Hollywood Hang that you all should subscribe to, whether it's through the podcast app or just follow them on Instagram. They talk a lot about industry stuff and their own experiences as assistants and everything. It's really cool. But the gentleman, as a part of the duo, was talking about how a fun way to brainstorm an idea is to consider the worst possible character to put into this situation, or if we have this type of situation, the best character to put, like the most equipped or the most talented, kind of go to the extremes in terms of that type of character in order to then make that situation that much more interesting and fun. So what's fun about this first little step, character uniqueness, is that you're actually going to be creating a more unique situation simply by further developing your character. So when we hear this term emotional flaw, which I'm sure you've all heard, it's an integral part of the story and your development. What we don't always understand is that a character's flaw is A, not always supposed to be an entirely negative attribute, and B, that a character flaw is driving the engine of the story. The plot that you've developed is meant to draw out your character's flaw, to kind of put it out on a platter, and the character is meant to respond to the plot in a flawed way. So character uniqueness then is derived primarily from personality and belief meeting plot situation and goal, because you naturally will create a more interesting and more unique character based on the situation we're placing them in. So what's the most unique element to your character that we haven't seen before? That's another level of brainstorming that we want to be thinking, because that needs to be coming out and showing itself as often as possible. And by most unique element, I don't mean an ability that they have or that they're psychic or whatever. I mean, how many different layers can we place on top of a character to make them stand out as someone that we either haven't seen before or it's a new version of an older character that we have. Now going into story uniqueness, what about your story's plot, goal, and or situation is different and we haven't really seen before? This is important. And the character has a lot to do with this. But one of the most difficult aspects of being a writer is coming up with an idea that hasn't been done before. I mean, it's kind of the holy grail of this whole thing, that we're trying to do something that's brand new. And yet it's so incredibly important that we do this. The best way to stand out is to deliver a kind of story hook that's either a new twist on an old paradigm, a flip or combination of genres, or these last little three. Is the character in your story someone we haven't seen in this particular situation and plot before? Do you have a hook that's so high concept that you're amazed no one else has thought of this? If you do, please reach out to me. Are you presenting a theme within a genre that we haven't experienced before? So there are two primary things. Like I was saying, who's the character that we're placing in this situation, and will that make it feel that much more interesting? When you have plot ideas that are really hooky, the concept itself kind of sells, like The Purge or The Hangover, even Liar Liar. But those concepts can be executed in a way that doesn't allow for that hook to be as interesting, and it's usually by way of character. So, and we also, you're presenting a theme within a genre that we haven't experienced before, meaning the theme within that particular genre. If you're trying to write a horror movie, is love the theme? How often do we see love or a version of some kind of platitudinal statement of love being played out within a horror movie. So you want to be thinking along those lines. Well, how do I take something familiar, but then add a layer or two, level that idea up so that it's a new version? Because audiences love familiarity. It's why fantasy and science fiction is so difficult. The genres have always been hard, and they always will be. And believe me, I work in the fantasy realm as a writer myself. It's so difficult to sell those ideas because you're creating a world that people need to know all the rules and what are the magical laws and who are these different creatures and characters and monsters. And so it's already not familiar. But if there's a way to make fantasy a little bit more familiar, that's why we hear so often requests for grounded sci-fi or grounded fantasy or grounded thriller. It's because it's easier to sell those ideas because the audience already has a semblance of understanding the world they're about to move into. Like this little note above the worm says, be a student of film, TV, books, everything story. If I had like 7 seconds with you on this webinar, I would say you need to read more. The ISA has an amazing screenplay library. Scott, not to just put this on you, but if you can find the script library link and put it in the chat box. We need to be reading more scripts, everybody. Not only the purpose of seeing how they're putting words on the page, because that, of course, is a huge educational tool, but to just understand what it is that people are doing. What are they creating? Stay up to date on Deadline.com, Hollywood Reporter. Pay attention to the movies and shows that are being produced. We have to. We have to be students of all this. Know your genre so well that we could call you a genre geek. If you're going to write in romantic comedy, you better be watching 12, 15, 20 different romantic comedies so that you know what those stories are, you know who the writers are, you know who the directors are, but then also the structure and the beat count. Because in romantic comedies especially, it's very structural, very formulaic, but there are ways to change it up. Look what 500 Days of Summer did. That was a romantic comedy, but it was like told in different, it was like this scrambled, almost told backwards kind of romantic comedy. And so there was just a new way so we want to be thinking of what can we do to make this story unique, to make the project as unique as possible. Theme and message. This is a big one, and I don't have that much written on the page necessarily, but it's more than just a basic platitude of love conquers all. You want to get specific. Your thematic statement should be specific to the story that you're telling, at least when you're developing it for yourself and when you're pitching it to people. Theme is closely connected to character flaw. The way theme and message is presented is almost always, if not always, through the process the character goes through, the change that the character experiences. And then by the end of the movie, we see some form of change and evolution in that character. And the actions that character takes shows he or she is overcoming whatever flaw or whatever was holding them back, and they're coming into a new identity, et cetera, et cetera. That then is going to help present and state theme. Pixar movies, Disney movies, they literally state theme because it's, family children's entertainment. But also, thinking along the lines of what I have written here in the paragraph is that you have something to say and only you can say it in your own way. Other people might have somewhat of the same theme and message, but you have a different take on it. But, we don't want to get lost in trying to come up with, like I said, this love conquers all basic, boring line. You want to invite your character and his or her flaw into the thematic statement, because whatever your theme is directly reflecting not only the climactic moment of your story, but what the audience can expect to experience emotionally through your second act, relationships, complications, and low points. So thematic brainstorming and really thinking along the lines of, I have a story to tell about this, or I want to tell a story about this. And it's not about, monsters invading Mars and humans being stuck in the planet or whatever. It's like, what does it represent? What's the metaphor? What is in me emotionally that I want to share with the audience? Because that's the universal emotional connection that art is supposed to do and create. Arena and world. So this is very relative to every project, of course, but not nearly enough time is spent considering where we, the audience, are going to be living for an entire series or a movie, or even a short story. Color your world, even if it's just a general suburb. What about that suburb can help paint a picture of what's going on inside your character's head and heart? So let's say you have, like a new version of Goonies or something, where these kids during the summer go on this incredible adventure and they discover treasure, and it's all throughout their little town. That world isn't going to be, it's going to be like our world. it's familiar, etc. There aren't going to be a ton of rules or laws or anything that we have to present to the audience. But then look at it and go, well, what am I trying to say thematically? Who are these characters that are involved? What are the lessons and the evolution that they're going to be going through and experiencing? How do I then create this little world that I'm putting on screen to make it somewhat reflect what's going on inside of the characters? Are the colors of the houses really different? Everything down to like the water fountains in town. Like I live in this little town that used to be the circus capital of the country, and the drinking fountains are open mouthed. Giant statue of an elephant in the middle of our water tower park, and there's there's flavor to it. So we just want to be thinking, how do I color this world a little bit? How does the arena in which your story takes place help shape the theme, tone, and even future obstacles? Because especially if you're going to have some form of an adventure story where these kids are going to be playing around in their own hometown, what are the little locations within the town that are going to represent issues for them to overcome? It's your world. Let us and your characters experience everything it has to offer, the obstacles it presents, colors, mood, tone, overall feeling it gives. Okay, main character stage of life. Now we're kind of getting into the structural parts of brainstorming. And what's fun about this is that we're not necessarily getting into outlining. These are just the anchors of the actual, I'm trying to use a word other than structure, but these are the anchors of the structure. So main character stage of life, this is in reference to the beginning of your story. But what are they on the verge of? Or did something just happen that was big? So examples like in Legally Blonde, we see the world that Reese Witherspoon's character is living in, and relatively quickly, she is broken up by her boyfriend. Even though she thought her boyfriend was going to be like forever love, they're going to get married and they're going to have this perfect life, he breaks up with her. So that's what I mean by like there's a life moment that is either just happened or we see happen or is about to happen. They're going to get a promotion, or they were just fired. They're going to turn 16 years old. There's a stage of life that we're coming into. Then 2, how is their flaw affecting their regular life? So their life before the big situational setup. I call it the setup event. Some people call it the inciting incident. I have an argument as to why those two are different. Doesn't matter. So we want to see our character in the world prior to any major plot introduction. If you start your movie with or a TV show like Stranger Things, where we see the scientist running down the hallway and obviously everything's really weird and gross, and then he runs into the elevator and then he waits and then the monster grabs his head and pulls him up through the elevator, and like that's the opening scene. We have no character connection to that scene. It's all plot and mysterious. We don't know what happened. That's fine. You can start your movie or story or TV show with that kind of scene, but it's not going to have a direct connection to the main character yet. We need to see and understand and feel for who this character is, their type, their beliefs, their desires. Why can't they have what they want? And then also how they're emotionally reacting to all of this. Are they, kind of acting like a victim? Are they overprotective? We want to be showing that because it's defining in a subtle way, sometimes not so subtle, but really the theme of the story. We're going to see this type of character, and we, the audience, inherently know this character is going to go through all these things in the second act. We don't know necessarily how they're going to be connected because it's still like the first 4 or 5 pages of the script. But we can assume, okay, they're probably not going to be this way by the end of the movie, And then 3, like I said, what do they desire, want, wish for? Why can't they have it? We want to really understand, and this has nothing to do with plot. This is all just their own personal stuff, right? All right, moving to the next one, secondary character effect. And effect. So you want to be brainstorming these things about this secondary character. Basically, this is the second lead. This is the Samwise to Frodo. This is Doc Brown to Marty. It's just about every story has some kind of secondary character that's going to be going on this adventure and journey with the main character. You can have multiple. You don't only need one. But you want to be brainstorming their flaw or flaws, how it's different than your main characters. That's really important. They don't have to be opposites. Like in Finding Nemo, you have Marlin and Nemo. Marlin and Dory. Marlin can't let go of anything. Dory literally forgets everything every 5 minutes. That's an exaggerated example, but it's a nice example of the differences between main character and secondary, because we see why the secondary character kind of needs to be in the life of this main character, at least within the story that we're experiencing. What do they believe? How do they show it? Consideration of where and how this relationship is going to end up, because this relationship is almost, if not equally as important as the plot storyline, because every story, and if there's anything I hope that you write down, hopefully you write down a lot of notes today, but it's an important note to make is that every story is a relationship story. Even in Castaway, he had a relationship with the island, he had a relationship with Wilson, he had a relationship with Helen Hunt. He just wasn't with them other than Wilson. So everything is, we evolve as humans because of our relationships with other people. So we want to think about how and why is this relationship with the secondary character so important? And what are they going to learn from each other? How could they fall apart? What are the differences between the two, and how could those differences create conflict? The secondary character is very similar to the opponent or villain or whatever kind of, antagonist you have in the story, because they're both kind of doing the same thing, at least from a metaphorical standpoint or a meaning standpoint. The secondary character is pushing the main character into situations that the main character might find dangerous or difficult, in order to achieve a goal. The opponent is pushing and moving the main character into situations that will change that main character in order to stop them from achieving the goal. So there's a little bit of a fine line. And that's why in romantic comedies, you see quite often that, like in When Harry Met Sally, you have Sally be both the opponent and the secondary character. And that's totally fine. She kind of flips, there's going to be an opposing nature within that secondary character. But the effect that that character has on the main character is what's so important. So consideration of where and how this relationship will end up. You want to be thinking that, because we don't want to forget that this is a relationship story. I don't care what movie or show you're writing. TV is even more important. The main reason people tune into a show is because, like, hey, cool, Wednesday Addams. I like the kind of the world and the gothic nature, and her character seems kind of funny, and just all the weird characters and creatures that'll be involved in the show. But we'll keep watching the show because of the relationship storylines. Yes, because the plot's cool and we want to solve a mystery or something. But the only reason it's enjoyable is because of the characters that are involved. We want to know what the secondary characters' personal goals are. What do they want just emotionally outside of the plot? How their personality differs from the main character. Their role in pursuing the goal. Literally, what are they going to do? And like I said at the bottom, at the heart of every story is a meaningful relationship. Let me check the comments just to see if I have anything. Okay, no comments. So either that means you're all bored out of your mind, or you're furiously taking notes. Hopefully not too furious. But if you have questions, everybody, post them. Put them in the comment section. Scott will star them, and I will answer those questions at the end. And it can be about anything. It doesn't have to only be about this lecture. It could be about the industry, about the screenplay contest, whatever. Well, we'll just keep going here as maybe you think up some questions. Okay, opponent with a motive. We want to understand, that's what I mean by with a motive. Why are they doing what they're doing? Is your antagonist a villain or just an opposing force? Is it an opponent? Is it a rival? We want to be able to differentiate that, because I don't necessarily like the word antagonist, because it's just a little too nebulous, a little too vague. I mean, almost every character in a story is going to be antagonizing to the main character. The whole point of the story is for the main character to evolve at least a little. So we need antagonizing forces. So for your opponent, is it a villain? If it's a villain, then you have Hans Gruber, from Die Hard. We've got Ursula from The Little Mermaid. You have like kind of a world-dominating type of attitude and motive behind your character. Not every opponent is that way. If you have a mother-daughter relationship like in Lady Bird or something, she's not a villain, the mom. She's opposing, and she's an opponent to the main character, but mainly because of what the main character wants. The opponent, her mom, doesn't want the same thing for her. So there's an opposing force. What do they believe and how do they show it? Just like the secondary character, we want to know that about your opponent. What's the opponent's weakness? Think about not just for reasons of plot, but can we have at least empathy in a little way for that opposing character? Do we understand where they're coming from and why they are who they are? Empathy and sympathy are two very different things. What do they want? Why do they want it? Basically, that's the motive. What specific obstacle are they placing in front of the main character? Or obstacles? Are they actively going to place this boulder in that road? Or are they going to, blow up their house? Or are they going to do sneaky little things to manipulate them? We want to be thinking along the lines of what are they actually actively going to do? Even though you may not know exactly how it's going to play out structurally or what the scenes and moments are going to be doing, we need to spend the time at least thinking and brainstorming those. And then, of course, their relationship to the main character, that's pretty straightforward. Do they know each other? Have they never met? All those ideas. The opponent represents what the main character is trying to emotionally overcome. That's really the big piece of this slide. I should probably make that a little bit bigger. But when we think in terms of metaphor and meaning, almost always, whatever the opponent or whoever the opponent is, it's going to represent something that the main character is or has always been afraid to overcome or confront in their own lives in some way. It doesn't have to be literal, but that's why in the 12th sequence at the end of your movie anyway, that battle scene occurs. I call it the battle scene sequence, where we see that the main character has to confront this main opponent for whatever reason. Of course, it's relative to your project, but even in When Harry Met Sally, what does Harry have to do? He has to go and confront Sally and admit, I'm in love with you. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. That's something he never would have been able to admit early on in the story because he's changed so much because of his relationship with Sally. But also Sally represents vulnerability and openness and honesty and love and, all of the things that Harry has never been, even though it isn't stated outright. We just see that occur throughout the story. So we want to be thinking along these lines about your opponent. Okay, the ticking clock. I will say not every single story needs a ticking clock, but some kind of construct of time is important because, just generally speaking, what would happen if the goal isn't achieved? You can answer that question because you know that story. But this is a reference to stakes too. Is there a countdown to failure or success? Do they have to do this in 24 hours? Is it even just like Before? It's called Before Sunrise with Ethan Hawke and I can't remember his co-star. But they only have one night. They know that by the morning they're going to have to leave. So there's even that, even though it's not a literal ticking clock where a bomb's going to go off in 8 hours or whatever. There's a feeling of a construct of time. And for those of you who are trying to write like a biopic, biography about a famous person or an amazing true story, if you're pulling that information from a book, you're just not going to be able to get it all into the movie. This is too much information, and that's okay. This needs to be your version of the adaptation of this story. Adding a constraint of time, like when does this occur within the life? When does this movie occur within the life of this main character? Is it over 2 weeks? Is it over 1 month? Try not to spread out your story really any longer than a year. It's very difficult unless you have a specific reason, and like kind of the I can't think of the word, but how you're going to show this, like the Curious Case of Benjamin Button, we're going to literally see over a course of time this guy grow younger and younger, and it's just really weird seeing Brad Pitt grow from an old man to a baby. But nonetheless, we have to be thinking along the lines of time. What is the duration of the story? Like I'm saying in number 3, 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 years. If it is, you're going to have to be able to connect the transitions, and make sure that it's still exciting and interesting, because it's difficult for audiences to spend time with a character who is 12 years old for 15 minutes, and then suddenly they're 29 and it's like a different actor, and then suddenly it's another actor that's probably going to have to play, or this 29-year-old actor has all this makeup on and they're like 78. It's harder for the audience to be able to connect with that character, so we want to be thinking along those lines. Ticking clocks in general really do help elevate a story, especially if it's a literal one. If there is a constraint of time, which defines stakes, what would happen if the goal isn't achieved? Okay, going back to structure a little bit. So this is another anchor of the story sequences. The setup event happens around sequence 2, which is roughly between pages 10 and 20, not to get too formulaic. But what propels your character to pursue something? So if you've brainstormed these prior things in terms of who your characters are, just emotionally, personally, what they want, what their flaws are, and you generally know what your conceptual situation is, the general story, then we want to be thinking, okay, well, what actually propels the character to pursue whatever goal has been presented to them? It's usually connected to an emotional desire. The main character showed us a personal desire early on in that, main character stage of life sequence. And so this new opportunity is a way for that character to achieve that desire, even though sometimes they might say, no way, I'm not going to do that. The refusal of the call, as Joseph Campbell calls it. I'm just noticing it says Warner and Spencer down here. Just ignore that. I created this in Canva, and I guess I forgot to take that out. Anyway, it's the main character may not think of the setup event as an opportunity, but we as the writers need to think of it as an opportunity. This is an opportunity for the story to really get launched. We're going to be placing this character in a situation that is going to force them to pursue something. It's stakes driven, just like what I was talking about before, both personal and plot specific. There needs to be a dilemma and problem associated with the plot setup, a personal dilemma and a plot dilemma. If this doesn't happen, this terrible thing could happen, if we really just break it down simply. And it's going to test the flaw. Whatever situation they're going to get themselves into in the second act, whatever they're pursuing, they may not necessarily know outright. Some movies are obvious. The 40-year-old virgin, his friends are setting him up to go on dates. He knows this is going to be difficult. It's going to test his flaw. But the presented opportunity to pursue a goal will either immediately test their flaw or eventually show them that their flaw is not going to work within this situation. They're not, in a way you can think about the trajectory of a story. It's not just a character that moves through the story and pursues something. It's a flaw that moves through the story and pursues something. So that flaw is what's getting changed and tested, and they're going to refuse to change. They're not going to want to be someone different. Michael Haig talks about the idea of a character who is kind of wearing this false identity their whole life. And then this movie that they're experiencing, which they don't know it's a movie, but whatever situation they're experiencing is going to force them to let go and shed that false identity and come into who they actually are, their true self. That takes an immense amount of conflict. If we just look at our own lives, most of us are probably pretty set in our ways, in our beliefs, and our personality. And when that's tested, we don't want to change. And so the whole idea of a story, if we really want to go broad, is to force a character into a situation that is going to make them confront something within them. The second act is being set up, and the second act is all about flaw confrontation. Whatever the situation you're placing that character in, whatever plot that you've come up with, the character, him or herself, is going to be changing through that, but because of conflict, because of the choices they need to make. And slowly that false identity is going to come out. They're going to fight back. They're not, they're going to revert back to their flaws sometimes. That's going to affect relationships. Again, it's always a relationship story. So you want to be brainstorming. What is the setup event? What is the inciting incident that happens that presents a situation and an opportunity to pursue something? Okay, and then, of course, this is a big one, the second act and recurring moments. So this is when you're actually starting to look at what is the type of moment that I'm going to see or the audience is going to see in the second act. What kind of plot structure do you have? Every single movie or story or TV show or book written, every story ever has some form of one of these five. Escape, it's an escape story. It's a retrieve or find story. It's a convince or learn, seek justice or truth, or a defeat story. And so what I mean by that is that the setup event is going to be connected to, we need to escape this thing. Here's why. And if we don't, we're probably going to die. Or this terrible thing's going to happen. So their pursuit is then to escape. They need to get out. Or here's an opportunity that we need to find this, the Declaration of Independence has a map on the back. We need to go find it. I don't know how we're going to do that, but we're going to see in the second act, them trying to retrieve and find this thing. The setup event then is also going to connect to, convince or learn. We have this new idea that could save the world. Now in the second act, we're going to see them trying to convince and teach people. So I think you get where I'm going with this. That's what I mean by a recurring moment. If it's an escape movie, we're going to pretty much always see them trying to escape it. What's The Fugitive? I mean, the title it might as well be Escape. He's constantly on the run. And so we know as an audience, I can expect to see those things. Yes, you can combine a couple of them. Rarely do you have all five, but you want to choose one. And sometimes it's like you've already inherently created or brainstormed this idea, or at least the structure of what it is. But then we have to pay that off, right? If we have a setup, we have to pay it off, and we have to be able to deliver the types of moments that are in line with what that setup is. What type of moment will the audience experience over and over again in a good way? So audience expectation is huge, and it's what sells. What's the hook? Will we see this type of moment play out through the second act? And so that's going into some more specifics, like in Liar, Liar. We know that we're going to see Jim Carrey unable to lie for 24 hours. That's the moment. It recurs over and over again. If the other plot stuff wasn't involved, like the biggest case of his life and the son that, made the wish and the ex-wife, maybe marrying somebody new, then it's just like an SNL skit. And we just see Jim Carrey physically unable to tell a lie, which would still be funny, but it would be boring after a while. But nonetheless, what is the type of moment we're going to try to see or expect to see? What's the major twist and complication at the midpoint? So this is a big one. This is one that sometimes you don't always get right the first time, because it's like, well, geez, I don't know what's going to happen necessarily at the midpoint, but I know I need to work my way there. And just thinking about what that midpoint is, it's either a high point or a low point, but something forces the main character in a new direction, point of no return, and it's not just the plot that twists. In other words, whatever happens, it's hard to give an example because you all have different projects, but it not only sends them a different direction, like, oh no, the treasure isn't here, we have to go search somewhere else. There's also an emotional problem that's created. There's an emotional complication. This changes things for them emotionally and personally. So we don't want to forget that. But the reason why we can brainstorm this a little bit, even before you're in the structural sense of actually outlining or writing pages, is because we've already done the work in terms of the character brainstorming. Who is this person? What do they want? Why do they want it? What are their flaws? What do they have to confront personally and emotionally? That midpoint complication is going to be the big moment that really tests their flaw. Harry and Sally sleep together at the midpoint of When Harry Met Sally. And talk about testing Harry's flaw. He's so terrified of commitment, and he doesn't want to be vulnerable. He doesn't want to fall in love with somebody. And now he just did it with his best friend. Huge twist and complication, new direction of the whole story. So we want to be thinking along those lines. Your first act setup, like I'm saying, is a window into the type of moment we're going to experience in the second act, the recurring moment. All right, moving now then to another structural reference, the low point. So failure is an option in the story, and it happens at the end of the second act. The main character is responsible for creating the failure. The low point is directly connected to the main character not correcting the flaw. So this is a big one. I could probably have a whole webinar and lecture on just the low point, because there are so many connected dots. I don't have that much time, and I want to make sure I get to some questions and things. But the big one that I notice when I'm reading scripts, and I've read so many screenplays and I work with so many writers that, through the outlining process and the page writing process, is that too often I see the low point just happen to the main character. They're not actually responsible for creating the failure. And the failure is always going to be connected to what were they pursuing in the first place, not only from a plot standpoint, from just emotionally, what do they want? And if you look at it from the standpoint of real life, if something bad happens to us and we didn't create the problem, we're not going to learn anything. We're just going to be angry or sad or whatever. Like, we're not necessarily, that we might have a learning experience, if something terrible happens, but it's not really a hard pressing on our soul and being if we aren't responsible for creating it. So the main character needs to have some kind of part to play. I'm not saying they're going to actually actively or consciously make everything fail. It's the process that after that midpoint and everything changes in a new direction, the main character is going to be pushing and pushing and pushing, usually reverting a little bit back to their flaw, refusing to change. And like I'm saying in number 3, the low point's directly connected to the main character not correcting their flaw. So the low point happens, end of second act. Everything feels like it's over. I don't know how they're getting out of this, not only from a plot standpoint, but personally. But then as you move into the third act, the main character understands and realizes his or her mistakes. And that's how real change happens. The main character knows they can't be that way anymore. So we have to see that low point happen from a personal standpoint. It's not just the plot fails. It's the character is responsible for the problem. And then the battle scene or the climax, this is the big, last moment or set of moments. The opponent is confronted and we see that flaw is corrected at least a little, a version of them. Doesn't mean the character needs to be 180 degrees different, but we see that they're learning, that they've evolved past who they were at the beginning of the story. While the opponent embodies what the main character needs to overcome, like I was saying earlier, ultimately by overcoming the opponent, the main character overcomes him or herself. They do something they never would have been able to do in the beginning of the story. That's a big one. And it's because of the obstacles that they faced during the second act and because of the relationships they formed and bolstered that helps them overcome this main character. It's all the lessons that they didn't even know that they had learned. And then the low point happens. Oh my gosh, I didn't learn my lesson. So they're then, in victim mode in sequence 10 as the third act starts. Something happens in the sequence 11, which then kind of gets them rallied and a new plan. The relationship comes back to him or her and they kind of see the error of their ways. And now they have to go and confront this big problem. So the main character needs to experience the failure of the low point and the breaking of relationships in order to move toward this battle scene. Usually, almost always, there's some kind of an estrangement between the main character and the secondary character in the low point. That's sequence 9. So it's Luke and Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan dies at the low point of the first Star Wars. And so, and your character doesn't need to literally die, but there's a breaking apart. Then they come back together and they're stronger because of it. And then they have the ability to be able to face whatever conflict that they need to overcome. And it's usually not what they expected. The goal is still the same. We have to do this, but there's an emotional aspect to the evolution that they are experiencing and have experienced. By overcoming the opponent, theme is shown and or stated. Theme is shown and or stated because flaw is corrected. So that's a big one. I know that we hear that term all the time. Be smart, know how to start. But we hear the term flaw all the time. And I get it. After a while, it's like, oh God, what does it even mean? And we're rolling our eyes. And it's just like, do I need a stupid flaw? Forget about the word. Like the word doesn't really matter. We know that this character has something that needs to change within them. And they need to experience this story in order to change. For TV, it's a much longer, drawn out process. But even by the end of the series, the character is going to be different. They're not going to be a completely different person. And like Harry in When Harry Met Sally is still kind of his neurotic self at the end of that movie when they're both sitting on the couch and talking about how they got married. But he's open. There's like one aspect of him that is allowing this to be who he is now. And it makes all the difference. So work on that character stuff. I'll stop sharing my screen here. Work on the character stuff. Work on all of these things. This recording will be available, so you'll be able to go back through this and review it. And because I'm not going to send the PDF to everybody because it would be days of me trying to individually email everyone. So you can review this and go back through it all and just make this like a list. I have to brainstorm this. I have to brainstorm that. I promise that it's going to help you see your story better. I can't promise that your story is going to sell or anything like that, but you will become a stronger writer because you're working through this stuff. Let's see what we have here in terms of questions. Ad legacy. Regarding story uniqueness, a major LA studio responded to a written pitch. Very interesting story, but can't see it as a musical. What are your thoughts? My immediate thought is just from a basic business standpoint, musicals are so difficult. I love them. It's probably like the pinnacle of movie experience, a really good musical. But they're so hard. They're so hard to make because audiences are not necessarily all about them. Relatively difficult sell. But it's also a huge production, and you need the exact right people to be making this, musical, and the actors and the director. And so there are so many moving parts to it. So I can kind of understand. Now, I don't know the story, so it's hard for me to be like, well, here's why. But they are probably looking for ways to simplify it a little bit. So that might be where they're coming from. The next one, the true story, is a mix of two genres. Studio couldn't see how a murder trial could be a musical. Now I'm kind of understanding a little bit. Chicago, Moulin Rouge, witness for the prosecution, The Great Gatsby. Yeah, I mean, I kind of understand it a little bit better because, well, for one, I've kind of seen like there was a show that they tried to make like a Hill Street Blues musical TV show or something in the late 80s or something, and God, it was embarrassing. It was awful. So bad. I'm not saying this story would be awful or embarrassing, but the idea of a just murder in general, I don't know. It's hard for me to really comment on that and tell you exactly why they may have said no. But the fact that they were already interested in the story tells you, well, maybe there's a way to get this story out there. And then if it becomes a huge hit down the line, maybe they turn it into a musical, original musicals that aren't based on prior material, sometimes a little tricky, because it goes back to the idea of audiences like something familiar that they already kind of know. The Greatest Showman is a good example of a unique original musical. But they got all the right players together. The music was unbelievable, and the lyrics were incredible, and it was based on the how the circus was formed, and so there was a little bit of familiarity. Musicals are just generally very difficult. I don't want to ever tell anybody not to write them, but it's not necessarily a way to go for an emerging writer unless you are all in. Like, this is the writer I'm only going to work on musicals. I have a musical background, and I love them so much that I'm just going to, so there's some decisions to be made there. I don't know if that helped. I hope there was some amount of support. So let's see here. I'm just looking at other little comments, but Austin said there was a spoiler alert. Yeah, maybe for Harry and Sally. If you haven't seen Harry and Sally, then you should watch it, especially for those of you who like romantic comedies. These are all the questions. So hopefully, everybody, this was helpful. I kind of went through that relatively quickly. Amorous Lesko said, incredible, very informative information. Does the structure of story change if it's not a feature and it's a TV show? Yes, a little bit. Really good question. Difficult one to answer quickly. But I'll say this, and this is kind of a weird way to answer this. I'll go a little further than this, but the best way to learn TV structure is to watch and study traditional sitcoms. Friends, Seinfeld, Big Bang Theory, Mom, and just, they all have the same rhythm, and they all have main character, stage of life, setup, event, midpoint, complication, low point, resolution. All of them. It's almost to the timestamp. Not every single thing, exact is the same, but the structure of a story is generally the same whether you're writing a pilot or a feature. Pilots are much more difficult, especially if you're writing an hour-long, multiple characters, multiple storylines, because each of those individual storylines, the A story, B story, C story, they all also follow this level of main character, stage of life, setup, event, complication, low point. They all have the same structure, but you're having to weave them in and out. So you can't necessarily just look at the episode and go, here's sequence 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because you're technically having to do it with 2 or 3 sometimes 4 different storylines. So I guess I'll just kind of repeat myself. It does kind of follow the same structure. It's just easier to see and understand in a movie, because if you have 12 sequences, 3 are in the first act, 6 are in the second act, 3 are in the third act. Each sequence is roughly 10 pages long, usually less, because we do not want to write a 120-page screenplay. I hope you all remember me saying that. We need to get it down to 110. If you have 113, you might, it's fine. Don't write a 120-page screenplay. I don't care how big or huge the idea might be. It's just, as emerging writers who have not yet had anything produced, maybe some of you have produced, but we need to, come in at that range. Anyway, the structure is basically the same, but you're doing it for multiple storylines, and you can watch those traditional sitcoms because they all follow the same kind of beat structure. I don't mean joke structure. I mean how the story actually unfolds. And then you can also look at it from a season standpoint. If you have 10 episodes in a season, which is usually kind of normal, 10, or 8, 10, 12, they don't really make 24 episode seasons for even sitcoms anymore. But the season also kind of follows in a little bit more of a thematic or metaphorical way the process of sequence 1 being episode 1, sequence 2 being episode 2. It doesn't follow perfectly like that. Usually the big, huge plot setup of the season or series happens near the end of the first episode. But nonetheless, I think the best thing you can do is study the shows and pay attention to how it works from a structural standpoint. And you'll see almost always these storylines are probably falling along the same lines of a timestamp as most other shows. It doesn't necessarily mean that that's like they're less than, or that they're cliche, or that they're formulaic. They do that on purpose because the audience, we have expectations. I mean, there are so many shows available to us to watch, and if ours is taking too long, or it's way too slow to get the setup, or we don't really care about the characters, so we haven't really taken the time to get those characters, we're just going to turn it off. We have other shows we can watch. Same for a movie, really. Valika, please talk more about getting in touch if one has with me. Well, I will say I'm not like magic producer man by any means. I'm just saying if you have an incredible high concept like The Hangover, The Purge, the likelihood of people paying attention to that idea will be higher, because it's rare and very difficult to come up with something that's unique, but also really hooky. And yeah, you can email me, Valika, but I really don't have a lot of time to be able to go back and forth via email to give notes on a log line to get me, like, I hate to say it, but you kind of have to hire me to do that. I feel bad saying that, but September and October, I've just been deluged by, script read requests and calls, and which is great and it's fine. But I also have the 30-day challenge coming up. Anyway, you're welcome to email me, and I'm happy to give a little bit of back and forth. But, in terms of feedback and my thoughts on, whether or not something will sell, it's tricky. It's so relative. But I'll do my best. Leslie, thank you so much. I've been struggling to make significant changes, and you've made clear exactly how I can make great stories forward with my film. There you go. You're welcome, Leslie. I'm glad that helps. Talking about hiring me, Valika. Yeah, email me, and I'm happy to work with you, and in whatever way I can, give you some options in terms of what I have to offer. Yeah. Give a lot to think about, especially with how to create characters that matter, support the narrative. Yeah, I mean, all of what I went through, I'm firmly aware how easy all of this seems. Like, that's all I have to do. It's not that easy. I've been doing this, just as long as some of you, or some maybe even longer in terms of just my own writing. So this is difficult. It's just, you got to take the time. You have to sit down. Number one step, just at least give yourself time every day. Even if you have 20 minutes, it's like working out. The more you write, the easier it becomes. You get into the rhythm and energy and flow. And if you actually have little exercises and tools, and what you're going to work on before you sit down, it just becomes that much easier. Have I created a book? There is a book on Amazon called Not Just Another Book on Screenwriting, or The Craft of Screenwriting. But you can type in Max Tim or Maximilian Tim. I believe my screenwriting book is listed under Max Tim on Amazon. You can look at that. But the coursework that we have available, especially the 30-day challenge, is probably going to be more valuable. Not only are you going to have access to the coursework in the 30-day challenge, but you're going to have access to it for the 6 months following. So you'll always be able to go back and review, and et cetera, et cetera. Of course, a book is less expensive, so I get it. I'm not saying don't buy my book, but you can check out the 30-day challenge. It's if you're on and in the Circle community with the ISA, you could just copy and paste the link there that Scott put in the chat box. Check it out. If it's not for you, totally get it. But in the meantime, hopefully this helped a little bit. The recording will be available, so you'll be able to review it if you want. I am available if you want to work together. My January professional lab, I'm kind of excited about it. I am going to be having a spring retreat next year on top of my regular September retreat in Wisconsin. And my Wisconsin retreat's coming up next week, actually. I just had a rush of anxiety go through me. There's a lot I still have to do. Oh, thanks, Scott. You put the link up there. Darshana, you're welcome. Lots to learn. Looking forward to the recording and the 30-day challenge. All right, everybody. I'm glad this helped. And again, if you need help with anything, you can email me. Just pay attention to what's going on with the ISA. They send out a lot of emails, I realize, but just scroll through each one because you never know. There might be something in there that is worth your time. All right, everyone, enjoy the rest of your Monday, and I will hopefully see you in the 30-day challenge.